to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company Window Works from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. It's Power Talk Friday. Today, Bethany Wrede Peterson of Atelier Wrede is with us. She was introduced to me by my friend and colleague, Toby Fairley. And, well, if you know Toby, then you know that that is a very high recommendation that you want to take seriously, right? Bethany is a designer, but she is also a podcaster and a business coach. She helps you and creative entrepreneurs find their voice to become more profitable, achieve greater meaning, and have more fun in their work. Bethany started her self-development podcast, which is called Arrived, in 2019, initially to help her then niche single men find their voice at home and in their relationships. Today, we learn about the pivot that she made during COVID. Bethany has an approach to niching that really helps cut through the noise and unlock what is truly that you want to offer. Okay, right? And she calls it finding your voice. And the way she explains it is different from any way that I've heard anybody else ever before, which is pretty cool, right? Her process for finding that voice is clear, applicable, and easy to follow. And I believe that if you are on the fence about niching and you follow her steps, you will be able to discover what you can offer that no one else can. Before we get to this conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our show sponsor, My Doma Studio. My Doma Studio is your complete designer toolkit, the place for you to manage all of your projects from time tracking to communication to product approvals so that you can free your time to focus on your business and to serving your clients. You can get started today and save 20% off your first 3 months at mydomastudio.com/a well-designed business. That's mydomastudio.com/a well-designed business. Now, let's hear what Bethany has to teach us about finding our unique voice. Hi, Bethany. Thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Thanks so much for having me, LuAnn. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, it's a fun opportunity for me. Here you are. You're an interior designer. You're a podcaster. You're a business coach. You're like all the things. So I'm
doing it all.
Yeah. And I'm here going, well, which one should we talk about? So I have to say, I'm sure lots of information about each of these areas where you show up and do your business will come out in the conversation. But where I would love to start is what I know is a particular struggle and is, I think, probably the heart of what you do, whether it is interior design or your podcast or in business coaching, is helping people find their voice. And here's what I want to set it up by saying. All the way back to the beginning of the podcast when I first met Mr. Fred Burns, and he came on the show and he talked to us about our only. This was a huge moment in the podcast. Lots of conversation about what's your only. And then, of course, we had Nancy Ganskalfer who came right on and said, niche is rich and broad is broke. And so, Bethany, you listen to the show. You know we've had this conversation many, many times. I don't think that there is anyone that has listened to the show more than a year now debates that niching is important, okay? Whether they do it or not, different story, but I think on principle, it makes valid sense that if you make a big impression in a specific area, you have a much better opportunity to attract the type of client that you want. The thing that I have learned over the last 5 years with this conversation are two obstacles. And I know you're going to be able to talk to both of them, but one in particular. The first obstacle is the fear. Is the fear of niching. We know what our niche is. We have pinpointed that voice and that passion, but we're afraid of turning away any of the potential clients that don't identify with that niche. But the second big fear, and it's not even a fear, the second challenge is discovering that niche, and in your language, that voice. And so I thought, this is where I want to have this conversation with you, because you have done it for yourself. And of course, you do help others do it as well through the podcast and the other arms of your business. So talk to us a little bit about it. Where do you want to start with this topic of really honing in and trying to figure out our own personal voice?
Right. Ooh, so much to unpack here. I love this. Where to begin? Well, okay, right. I mean, so like you're saying, your listeners, myself included, we know the power of niche or of niching, right? So that maybe doesn't need to be spoken about so much. I don't want to sound like the broken record. But you're right. What's really, really difficult, I think, for especially interior designers, because we tend to be the yes people. We're kind of taught to be the yes people, whether it's from clients, design school, whatever it might be, right? So I think it's very, very difficult from, being a designer myself and working with interior designers. It's hard to actually take a step up, maybe to take a stand and say, okay, you know what, this is where I want to niche. Because if we know that it's something we need to do, the big conflict, like you're saying, is, well, how do we arrive there? And one of the things that I would say to that, firstly, for anyone who has been listening to the show for a while, or is maybe just really tuning in now and starting to get used to this concept of, putting your flag in the ground and saying, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, how do I do that, is to really think about, firstly, well, what do I enjoy in the design process? And what I don't mean by that is I love, and believe me, I love all this too, right, from the design perspective. But when I'm saying this here, what I don't necessarily mean is I love styling bookshelves or I love doing X, Y, and Z. It's more like, what is my greater why for showing up and starting my business? What's my greater why for why I got into design in the first place? And who are those clients that I really have had great success in serving, and who I've had great relationships with? Because that's an indicator of that sort of first step to think about dialing in on a niche.
So I love this because, it is a place to start, because that is the challenge. If you have not developed your own voice or niche yet, is that's an actionable place, like to just consider whether you've had 5 clients or you've had 10 years worth of clients and you're thinking about rebranding or just getting more focused on the projects that make you happy, right? Is to actually review whatever projects you've done and give a good hard look at what were the components that made that a happy project, something that you enjoyed and you were passionate about working on. So what are some of the answers that come to mind? Is it, the type of aesthetic or the personality of the clients or the location of the project? Like, what are some of the things that somebody, when they're reviewing their past clients, would look for as the things that you would start to say, yes, that's it right there?
Yes, exactly. So for example, if you have, a real penchant for sustainable design and sustainability in design, and you've noticed that, let's say you had that one client who found you and said to you, hey, I really want to make this design project as sustainable as possible. What can we do? And that was something that was very gratifying for you, for the client. It worked out, very well. It's something like one of the biggest things that I like to say is, if you think about this from the perspective of what's not worked versus the perspective of what's worked, right? So where have you felt burned out in a client project? That's a huge indicator that that is not the direction that you want to be taking your niche, your voice into. So if you felt like, man, I really had to be that yes person for this client and I had to deliver on something that, wasn't really within my value system, and I'll just use that in the sense of sustainable design, right?
Mm.
As an example, that is an indicator that that is not where you want to go. So if we then, of course, take that information and then we recalculate that into, okay, well, what do I want? What does light me up? What does bring either a renewed sense of passion into me showing up every single day? Or if you're a newer designer, maybe you're just out of design schools, I know, some of your listeners are, then what is it that lights you up? And then, yes, exactly, looking at those examples, literally taking your journal or a notepad and doing a written exercise and just rehashing all of this, because you will start to see on the page the areas of conflict, let's say, and the areas where something is really working for you. And that's a huge indicator to say, okay, do you know what? I love sustainable design, for example. I had a great client project. This is where I want to go. This is where I need to start talking more. This is where I need to start focusing my efforts into my design practice through my content, through my design, through all of the different components, of course, that make a modern day interior design studio.
Mm. And when you either explored this for yourself or you've explored it with colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
go through some of the things. Like, so I think that when we have a passion for something that's easy to identify, right? Like sustainable design or empty nesters or the bachelors, then I think not that I think it's easy to arrive at that awareness, because you might take you having done projects for 5 years to do an exercise and be like, whoa, every time I look back on the projects that made me happy, they were always single men. Like, it's like,
Right.
Oh, great. Whatever I say goes, yay. Like, we don't have to ask what the wife or the mother or anybody thinks, right? So sometimes it does take that hindsight look to identify it. So I get that. But what happens if someone is going through this exercise, Bethany, and nothing seems, I know that you would probably say, no, look again, something is happening there. But when we don't see it ourselves the first go around, it's like, oh, I was happy they were a 2-career couple. I was happy there that they were a couple with, 2 kids and 16 dogs. I was happy there. That was a high rise. That was a rural thing. That was sustainable. That wasn't. Like, I've had these conversations where designers are like, help me filter down to the next level where I can get some clarity. Do you have suggestions for that?
Absolutely. Well, and I'll start that off by saying, to illustrate some suggestions here, I'll start that off by saying that when I chose my initial niche, which was single millennial men, and that's what I created my own podcast for initially, I had great success in that niche in the past. It was also at a time in my life where I was single. I was living in London. Like, that was kind of, I wasn't a single guy, but I was a single person living a very different lifestyle than someone who's been married for a number of years now, et cetera, et cetera. And I found myself moving away from being able to relate, I suppose, to that particular client. And so, coming full circle on your question, one of the ways that, again, we can then really sort of do a dial in on that sort of second level is, where do you feel like you can incorporate either your own story, your own, and of course it's different in interior design, right? But when we have a real personal connection, like if you look back on, let's say, that 5 years that you have been working with different clients, where have you really felt like you've been able to identify with that client, with their needs? Where have you been able to anticipate their needs and being able to do that easily? And I found myself not being able to easily anticipate that particular client's needs anymore. Like, I was scrolling through GQ and Esquire, like trying to get in their head. And that to me was that suggestion, hey, you know what, this isn't my niche, or this isn't my niche anymore. So for someone who is just really confused as to where they need to dial in, I think it always has to come from inside, because and that's why I say finding your voice, because when you really dial in and tune in to where you've been able to identify with that client project or that client, or you've been able to relate, and potentially have even a friendship with your client, let's say after that project completes, that is huge, because that is what's going to carry you to the next level of your business. And that's what's going to then further attract not only more people in your niche, but that right client to come and work with you.
You know what? I love this, Bethany. I'm going to tell you why I love this, because this literally proves what we've said a dozen times on the show. You can hear the same thing 5 million times, and sometimes somebody says it in a way that unlocks it. Okay. So I just had that unlock aha moment there. Okay. Because when you say the language, where do you relate? What clients, thinking back? So it's not just like, see, I think why it's been troublesome for some of our colleagues to identify this, hey, what's your Fred Burns only, what's your passion, what's your thing, is because we do that first level, hey, review your past clients and which ones were you really happy on. And happy is not as specific as which ones could you identify with so well that you could anticipate their needs, that you could identify with so well that you instinctively understood what they would like or want, or the way you would service them that would be successful. See, because right there, those lines, that's so clear for me. And the way you described it in relation to your own experience when you were single, it was easy for you to identify with what single men wanted. I remember we had Misty Maxey on the show, and she designed for single men. I don't know if she's still in that niche or not, but she did at the time. And she could put herself in the position of potentially the guest of those single men and saying, look, this shouldn't look like a frat house. It doesn't have to be GQ in here, but just make it comfortable for a woman to be in your space. You know what I mean? Like, I remember her saying something like, have a drawer empty in the bathroom, like little things, right? And that a single guy wouldn't know. But what you're describing is, as you left that period of your life and now you're in a period where you're happily married, and as you mentioned, for several years, all of a sudden you're not able to anticipate their needs anymore. You're not in that headset. Right. And that is very powerful. I like that. And that also explains why some designers have said, well, I can work with, married couples. I can work with baby boomers, because if you've been through the stages, it's easier for you to go back and identify and relate if you choose to, right? Like I can remember when I was a mother with, kids running around the house, and I, had to do on their schedule as opposed to my own schedule. Now, does it bring me as much joy as a designer to work with somebody in that stage if I've moved on to the stage where I'm a grandmother and I only have to worry about the kids coming once a week and making the house baby proof, at that level, right? You see what I'm saying, right?
Absolutely.
Very
Absolutely.
Cool. That was a good aha moment, Bethany. I like that.
Well, I'm glad I'm glad that's helpful. I mean, it's interesting when you were speaking as well. I was thinking about, we all have those projects that, man, they were a bear to complete, but they photographed beautifully and they were turnkey and it was all the things. But that's where we can't necessarily go. We have to go to that relationship. We have to go to that relationship with ourselves, with our own personal history, as well as the client's needs, where they're at in their lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. And really further to just sort of drill it down. Maybe I'm an interior designer that I am past child rearing and I am on to having grandchildren in the house. And of course, I'm completely capable of designing a home for somebody in their 30s with 3 kids, right? I'm capable of it. But to your point, if I'm going to assess the current and past projects, am am I enjoying that as much? Because maybe at this stage of my life, when I'm trying to have a conversation and trying to present a $15,000 chandelier to this Wall Street couple, and the two kids need their noses wiped, maybe I might be like, oh, they're cute, but in my brain I might be like, seriously, come on, right? Because I'm past that. It's like,
Right.
right? And so it's not that I can't do it. It's not that I don't have empathy, but is it the thing that I'm really like, whereas somebody in that same stage, or that really truly adores and loves every little nuance of childhood, I might be like, oh my God, they're so cute. I'll wipe that one's nose. You wipe that one's nose, right? Like, it's just, where's
Right.
your joy? It's not a right or a wrong, right?
Exactly. Exactly. You
Love
put it,
it.
yeah, you put it so well
That's
there.
crazy. That's crazy. This is like 5 years of trying to figure out how to drill down to that next level. And I love it because it just, I think we all tend to feel like, because it's true, we could do whatever we put our mind to, right? We can
Right.
design for whoever needs something designed. But the next level of really having a fulfilled business and a fulfilled life within that, being an entrepreneur, is having the opportunity to design for the people that we really like to do and be with all day, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when I look at when I take a look back at, let's say, my own business and my own practice, where I am now, I want to go have coffee or lunch with my clients. That was not, I mean, it was the case with, certain clients prior, of course, but you're right. It's like I have so much more uh empathy, and as well as true, care for that client, because I can empathize. Just
Mm.
like, you can empathize when, let's say, so I was working with someone who is a cancer survivor, and she decided, hey, you know what, after this experience, I want to help my clients cancer proof their homes.
Mm.
Now, that is not something that I would be able to do because I have not gone through that experience. And I'm not saying you have to have had to have gone through the fire or something like that. But when we can put ourselves in the shoes because we've been there before, that's when the voice comes out. And then you're absolutely right. You said it, where your career becomes much more fulfilling.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So interesting. And what I love also about this, it takes away the idea that a niche has to be a huge brand stamp, such as sustainability or, New York City, high rise lofts, like, it takes away, it brings it back to truly what is it that you enjoy, whether, because the person that lives in a high rise could live in a house in the suburbs, could live wherever, but identifying with who they are and how you connect or empathize and can anticipate their needs is not relevant necessarily to their surroundings, right?
Absolutely. Well, and especially too, we all know how rapidly the design industry itself has changed. To new technologies we're, quote unquote, competing against, et cetera, right? So yes, you hit the nail on the head. It's not simply enough now to use uh, simply to say sustainable design, right? Because we know that there are a thousand other designers that can work to that. It's about how do we demonstrate that we are the right person for that client? Not only we're right with the broader niche, but like with actually relating to that whole person's life and story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So good. So good. Now, I happen to have the big aha moment on step two. In case somebody listening is like, yeah, I'm still not getting it. What happens if I do yeah, but at you at this point? If I say, yeah, but I don't really think there's anybody that I can identify their needs. Like, I don't get it. It's not becoming clear to me yet, Bethany, who nobody comes to mind when I ask myself that question. Are there other questions or exercises that you encourage designers to go through to continue to drill down?
Absolutely. And it happens, right? This work is so hard to do on our own. We can't, it's really hard to get a 40,000-foot view of our own work, our own experience. And so what I would say to anyone who's, potentially having that sort of mindset block, because that's what immediately comes up to me, as someone who coaches in this, is that maybe that mindset block of, our mind saying, but I still need to be everything to everyone. I still need to be that yes person, that yes designer. And so what I would then say is, if you did know what it was that really lit you up, if you did know what it was that got you into design in the first place, or what really, makes you feel passionate, or what gets you out of bed every day. And let's face it, we don't always know what gets us out of bed every day, because half the time we're just getting up and we're doing our thing, right? So this isn't easy work. Don't make me, don't, I'm not trying to make it sound like this is really easy work. This is the tough work, especially when we are digging down now, let's say to level 3, and we're getting really real with ourselves. So what I would say to that person who is like, I'm just not getting anything, I would say, that old question, if you did know, what might that be? And just sit with it, see what bubbles up. And hey, if nothing bubbles up in that 5 minutes or that 15 minutes, or, even that first week, that's okay. This is not something that comes overnight necessarily. And so I want to just be clear on that. This isn't simply a matter of get a notebook out and within 5 minutes, you will have this all figured out. In some respects, this is a lifelong game. However, the more time we take to reflect on what we want, and not just simply within our niche or within, our business, and of course, all of these goals we need to have. But the more time we actually take to just sit in reflection with ourselves and say, what do I want? What makes me happy? If I didn't have to worry, if I knew that every client that I worked with was going to love me, they're going to love everything I say, they're going to love everything I present to them, I cannot fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
What direction would I go in? And sometimes just those two questions, dialing deep on those two questions. If I did know, what would that be? And if I couldn't fail at this, what might I be doing within my field? What direction might I take? Because I really think that sometimes we can do this work and then we get stuck. And that's just the way the mind works, isn't it? The mind goes, but we've been very comfortable playing, this I can do anything, design. And I'm not saying that that's, some designers can do that, and that's wonderful, and I have a ton of respect for that. But when it comes to really, really knowing who we want to serve, it's got to come with, how do we firstly look at ourselves and figure out what we want, because then everything else is much easier going forward.
I love it. So, if you did know, just pretend. It's like the what if, act as if question, right? It's the act as if mode. It's act as if act as if you have an idea. And for me, I always talk about the synchronicities in life. And when you were describing that process of, okay, just if you did know, what bubbles up, and to your point, something might bubble up and you might, just be like, oh no, you want to push that back down. It's like, that's not really it. You know what I mean? And so it's that, you can almost picture like apples in a barrel, right? You're like, no, not that. No, not that. But the idea, to your point, and the lesson is, just let them bubble up and bob around there, and don't really require them to make full sense right yet, right? And don't require them to be clear. That's what I took from that. Is that what you were thinking of? Just allowing the possibility that your mind is going to call up certain things, whether it's that moment or over the next couple of days, weeks, or months, right?
Absolutely. It's not something that we want to white knuckle. And hey, if it comes within 5 minutes or overnight, that's amazing. It certainly did not for me. In fact, at this sort of second stage in my life where I am now married, and I decided, when I moved back to America, that, yes, I still want to keep this niche. That was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. And I'm not going to say that I regret that, But sometimes when we don't allow things to percolate, sometimes when we go against our gut, and there was this little voice for me saying, but is this the right thing now at this point in your life?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to stress that it's not about a snap decision. And then the other thing I would say too is if we're going to go even on step 4, if someone's like, yeah, okay, but still, I'm blocked. Look at, let's say, other designers, other business people. Who do you gravitate toward? What are they doing? Why do you find what they're doing, let's say, sexy? And I don't mean that in a literal sense, but like,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that makes you look at that person and say, wow, I really love what they're doing. I love their guts. I love their bravery. I love what they're putting out in the world, whether it's design, it's a podcast, it's content, whatever it might be. Because sometimes that's the way that the mind can allow us to develop a niche without actually yet saying to ourselves, okay, this is where I stand and this is who I want to serve.
Mm. I love it because what happens is in the visualization of this exercise, to go and to talk about the synchronicity, it's like that's the sort of thing. It's like if you let it bubble up and there's a little idea there, and then all of a sudden, to your point, if you are looking around you and saying, well, who do I admire? Who do I respect? All of a sudden it's like, well, to me, those are the confirmations. It's like I have one idea here, something over there. I see something, hear something, and then I process it and it brings some clarity to me. And I'm like, oh, that's what I was thinking about 2 weeks ago when I was doing that exercise. And now it makes sense to me. And then a fourth thing or a fifth thing. And now all of a sudden in that exercise, you are starting to form what really is happening inside of you, that you're getting the clarity on that voice inside of you, right? I love that. And then I also love that if I couldn't fail at this, what direction would I take? Because I think, you tell me in your work, I find that we kind of know, but we feel like if we say it out loud, it either feels too boastful, it feels too impossible, it feels too far away, it feels too, why would I be the one to do that? It feels too, what makes me think I could do that? But the fact is that, if you just pretend you never could fail and you answered the question, what would you do? And you allow yourself to think on it, you can start to create pathways to have the courage to do that. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And when so for example, when I started my own podcast, I had all of those thoughts, right? Who am I? What's my voice? Who wants to hear from me? It's all been done, for all the stuff, all the stuff that we throw at ourselves as roadblocks, mentally speaking. And I had to reframe, and I think anyone who's listening to this can also think about this in terms of the reframe. I had to start thinking, well, what if when I put myself out there, and we can use that in any context, whether it's design, podcasting, whatever. What if when I put myself out there, people love what I do? People can't wait for me to show up again. People are actively encouraging me, not, let's say, trolling me. And I think that's sometimes what we think. Oh, everyone's going to be judgmental. And look, people are going to judge you no matter what. I mean, that is a fact of life. But if we think about this from that perspective of, actually, what if me stepping in to, my own voice is helping so many other people. And if I don't do that, then I can't help to my truest capacity in any sense of that word, whatever you do, but in this instance, of course, in interior design.
Well, and I agree with that because, and I've said that before to designers, it's like, if you second guess yourself, your talents, your, divine right to be doing this, then you're depriving the rest of us of that talent that you've got. Like, it's as simple as that. If you don't show up and do it, then somebody doesn't get it. And you need to think about that because there's somebody out there that needs only what you can deliver, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things there that I feel like I can hear listeners thinking, but that feels so audacious. And
Mm,
that's where I would say go back to those successful client projects.
mm,
Where have you made those clients happy? How, like that, I mean, that's the proof is in the pudding right there. You have
mm.
helped those people out. And I mean, yes, of course they could work with another designer, but if it's been a successful project in all respects, holistically, then you, like you're saying, you are the one person that could really serve them in a way that no one else could. And I think as designers, we need to start thinking about that more. We need to start championing ourselves more because imposter syndrome is huge for everyone, but I think especially in the field of interior design.
Right. And I love the idea of really just again the hindsight reflection of no, there are people that literally looked at you and said, "Oh my goodness, you did this for me. You made my life better, easier, prettier, whatever it was." And they really meant you, right? And how about this part of the other side of that same, coin, Bethany, is maybe put yourself in the place of the consumer. Can you think of any person, company, consultant, trade that you've hired and you just know, no, that person was the only person that really could have made this as successful as it was. Other people could have executed, but working with that particular person was extraordinary. You know what I mean? And that person could be a Tyler. That person could be the person who sold you your house because they went the extra mile to figure out the schools and the all the things for your kids. Like it's everyday things can change our lives, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the oldest adage in the book, but people buy people. People don't buy services or products.
Exactly.
People buy people,
That's right.
right?
Yep. I've done a
So
billion videos on that and articles and from Window Fashion Vision to AD Pro to everywhere in between. It's like people buy people, they don't buy product. It's as
right.
simple as that. And that brings us to one of the reasons why this is so important to do these exercises for yourself, not just for the pleasure of your entrepreneurial career, but because this is the major way to fight back on this whole product commodity driven way that interior design can be in a direction. The whole ordering online and checking prices on everybody. It's like when you can really zone in and work with somebody who is truly your ideal, person that you identify with, they're having that experience back. That's inherent in that relationship. You can't have it if you're not both having it, right, Bethany? I mean, you can have a good
Absolutely.
process, but you're not having that to your gut level core. This is the thing that I get out of bed for, this type of client, this type of relationship, this type of project, blah, blah, blah. And the more consumers have that experience, the more they will be the ones to say to their friends, okay, you can order that stuff online, but it's not going to be the same as when you get someone's professional opinion on all of the things that go around it, right?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Our IP, our intellectual property, our, I call it, your voice, so to speak. All of that is becoming, I mean, it was always important, of course, but for all the reasons that you've just mentioned, how the industry is changing so much and the commodification of it and, all the things that you just mentioned, that is the way that we as designers are truly going to be able to carry on in this industry and have people want to work with us specifically. I remember working with going in for an initial consultation years ago with a client. I'd never met them, just emailed over the phone, and I walked into the house and looked around and immediately saw this book by Mark Manson, and I won't say the full title because it's whatever, but it was The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F.
Oh, yeah,
And I
yeah,
noticed, yeah.
yeah.
And I had just read that book and I was blown away by it. And then there was this huge record collection that belonged to the husband, and I collect records myself. And I started there. It was like, okay, wait, before we even talk about your home, can we talk about this book? And can we talk about what you're collecting right now? Right. And that was a way, not only as an icebreaker, but it was a way to truly relate to that client. And it's a way that, and it wasn't a strategy. It was like, I risked potentially to, in their eyes, looking unprofessional. But I was like, wait, we just got to talk at a human level for a second.
Yeah.
Tell me about your story. Right. And then we talked about it. And then, of course, we had the consult. But it was, if we think about it from that perspective, that is an experience that cannot be bought off of, let's say, Amazon or whatever it is. And it's that experience that we need to continue to think about going forward, that sort of intellectual property, that unique voice that only every listener out there who is listening to this has, which is going to be very, very different to anyone else.
And the power in the example that you just shared with us, Bethany, it worked because you were truly passionate about that book, and it is a true passion of yours to collect records. You see, if I walked in and I had heard of the book before, or and I saw it on the shelf,
Right.
and I think I'm going to like do a jumping off point on that, that's not authentic. Because now if I say, oh yeah, that book, blah blah blah, the art of not this and that and the other thing, if they're super passionate about it and I can't return that, it's like, oh, okay, you just are saying that because of why, like you don't really get the book, right? Like, you see what I'm saying? So it's like, it's what I say all the time. The best sale on the planet is when it's a win-win. That's not a car salesman tactic if it's true. So yes, the tactic is look for something to identify with, look for something to connect with, look for something that you share. But the reality for the successful, interchange is it has to be true, right?
Right. Of course, because people are intelligent. They will be able to sniff that out if it's not authentic. But if it is authentic, it makes your job so much easier, and it puts your clients at ease. And again, it goes back to what we've been saying since the top of you're working within your passion, you're working within your niche that really on a level serves you as much as it serves the client.
Right. It's a funny story because my husband says it a lot. He'll recommend, if you go to a client's house or whatever and they've got a dog. Most people who have a dog are really super into their dogs. I've never met really somebody that just has a dog for whatever. I had a dog for whatever. I had a dog because I thought kids should have a dog. Okay. I ended up loving my dog very much. I'm not heartless, but I'm not a dog person. And, he always says, to salespeople, hey, if they have a dog, talk to them about their dog and stuff. And I've said to him a couple times, that's really great advice if you actually like the dog. But I don't like your dog. I don't want to talk to your dog. I don't want to talk about your dog. I don't want to pet your dog. I don't want to do anything with your dog. So that tactic does not work for me because I'd be like, here's your dog. He's really great. It's like, no, you'll see a mile away. I'm full of baloney on that.
Right.
So, and it's funny because Kim went with me on the sales appointments for many years, and she would die. Like, people would be like, oh, he just wants to sniff you. He just wants you to pet him. And my face would be like, there's none of that I want. I don't want any of that. Like, we have to get out of the situation. So Kim would be like, I'll pet the damn dog. You know what I'm saying? Oh,
Absolutely.
good, right?
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
it's finding that commonality, that place that you said earlier where you can identify with them, and whether it's in ice-breaking situations like that, or and really in the bigger conversation is that it's beyond the ice-breaking conversation. It's that the entire process just feels like you get it. Like you said, you can identify with them, you can anticipate their needs because you understand them at such a level that the empathy is right there, that you get it. You don't have to go searching for what's going to make this person happy. And we all look, by the way, we're not going to have every client in our pipeline every time, right? Like, we can make a mistake in identifying an ideal client. Sometimes we'll take a project, for other valid reasons. Hopefully it's not the kind that you get involved in for 6, 8, 10 months, 12 months, a year, because that's where you really can get burnt out. As you said, if you're working in a project that is not in your niche or your zone of genius or your joy, it's going to burn you out. But give yourself some grace if you make the mistake and take a project, but learn from it every time, right? Because don't you develop a muscle, Bethany? Do you agree that you develop a muscle for getting a little bit more cutthroat each time on sacrificing what your inner voice is telling you versus the projects that you're taking?
Oh, absolutely, 100% agree with you. It's I don't know if the word is foolhardy is the right word, but I'll use it. It's foolhardy to think that every single project that we're going to do is going to be a home run every single time. Even if it was like, the photographable project and it was beautiful, right? Not every single client can be, that person, right? But it's like you're saying, if we can go back and do a sort of post-mortem, so to speak, on, okay, what didn't work there? How can I in the future dial in even further on the clients that I want going forward, the projects that I want going forward, how I want to show up in my business going forward, from, your content strategy to the design to all the different, I'd say forward facing elements within your business. That's only the nature of running a business. It's peaks and troughs, isn't it? And it's learning experiences. And I wouldn't even say it's failures unless we're using the word failure from a really wonderful learning perspective.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. You know what? It's like I say all the time. You use postmortem. I say autopsy all the time. You have to go
Yeah.
review, right? You have to review the project, because it is, to your point, it's only a failure if you don't learn something from it. And that's one of those things where, my kids would say to me, yeah, Mom, everybody says that. And I'd be like, well, it's a cliche because it's true, right? Because it's in that review, because I know to be true, and you tell me if you've experienced it, but in that review, when you are literally saying, what the heck? Why did this go off the rails? How did I get to this point? I've always found when I wind it back, I can find the moment where I was like, yeah, that was when I convinced myself this would be okay. And I plowed through because, it was a big project, or it was, a referral from a client that I didn't want to disappoint, or whatever it is. But like, if I can wind it back and find that moment, then for me, yes, that particular project might not have ended really wonderfully and all the things, but by identifying that moment, when the universe sends that moment again the next time, it rings a bell. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
see, this is that thing again here. Are you going to do this again, sweetie? Like, really?
Right.
Did it work out so good for you last time?
Right. Exactly. And we all know the moment, but sometimes we think that we don't. We pretend like, oh, I
That's
don't
what
know
I'm
when that
saying,
moment
right?
was. Right. But it's like, okay, when was the point that you were waking up in the night, like sweating, thinking about the project? When was the point that you started to, become frustrated with that client, thinking, how dare they make these demands, when really it's like we're acquiescing in ways that maybe we shouldn't. Right. So we know, but again, it's about doing that work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
getting real with ourselves.
It is. That's it. That's the roundup of the whole thing right there. It's about doing the work, the fun, positive work of doing the exercises and asking yourself, which clients have I most enjoyed working with? Why did I enjoy working with them? What was the reasons? It's asking, if I couldn't fail, what would I do? It's asking, if I thought I knew what would make me happy, what am I hearing? It's asking, do I acknowledge that there's people that have done, quote unquote, average, normal everyday things for me, but because they were the one that did it, it was more positive, more successful. So if I recognize that that's possible for other people to do for me, then yes, I'm worthy and I'm worthwhile, and I show up and do those things for other people. And then, really sitting and reviewing when you ignored your voice, because it's hard in the moment you get better at it. That's what I'm here to tell you. If you do these exercises like Bethany is talking about, you get better at hearing the voice in the moment, right? But until you do, it's the reflection where you're like, oh yeah, there she was. She was yelling at me. And I was saying, no, it'll be fine.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And then at that point, you have to have the courage to get out of it, right? You have to have the hard conversation and say, look, this is the end of the line. We're not going to do this anymore. I'm torturing you. You're torturing me. Let's just agree to disagree.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There are so many conversations that we're having with ourselves, with our voice, right? The many voices that we have, I suppose.
Yes. I always said if anybody ever played the out loud reel of my inside voice, like, my God, I would be committed. I'd be arrested. I don't know what, but it wouldn't be pretty. So anyway, I mean, such good advice. I really, like I said, I love when I get the aha moment, especially on a conversation that we've had a dozen or more times. And that's so fun. It's just that little, you know me, I always describe it as the Rubik's Cube, right? It's like that one little click and it's like, wow, oh, that made sense. I got it, right?
Right. Oh, well, I'm glad that that's been the aha moment because no pressure, right?
No, it's fun. And that is, for me, what's so fun about doing this. It's that, 40 years in business and 700 conversations and I still go, whoa, I love that. So
right.
thank you. Thank you, Bethany, so much. Tell people, though, before you go, a little bit about, how they find you, your podcast, working with you, all the things.
Absolutely. So you can find my podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. It's called Arrived, just one word, Arrived. And that is one I would definitely encourage any designers out there to listen to because, of course, I'm speaking a lot to designers.
Mm-hmm.
And my website is atelierwrede.com, and that is a mouthful, so I'll very quickly spell it. It's ATELIERWREDE.com. And for any listeners of the show, please go to atelierwrede.com/LuAnn. You know how to spell that by now. I'm offering a complimentary 30-minute one-to-one discovery call with me, as well as my complimentary 5-step primer to podcasting for passion and profit.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. That's a nice surprise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Love it, love it, love it. So all of this information will be in the show notes as well. So don't worry if you are walking, jogging, running, doing, laundry or driving. All of it will be in the show notes, and you can take advantage of Bethany's generosity and offering that 30-minute discovery call and the download there. I had a great time talking with you, Bethany. Really, really did. Hashtag a smart lady on you there, by the way.
Oh, thank you, LuAnn. This was... I have to say, it's so fun. I knew we were going to have a ton of fun on the show, but it's so fun being able to chat with you about, so here's the thing. You can tell this is my passion. Mm-hmm. This is what lights me up. So case in point right there. I've had such a blast. Thank you so, so much for having me on the show today.
Thank you. It's funny how you can talk about the same thing over and over, and then one day someone puts it just a little bit differently, and it clicks, and it changes your perspective. Right? You heard that happen to me in the conversation with Bethany today. We talk so often about thinking back to the clients that we've enjoyed working with and figuring out what common denominators they have. But Bethany said it a little differently. It's not just about who you liked or who you enjoyed working with or even had the rapport with. What it is thinking about the clients who you resonated with so strongly that you instinctively knew how to serve them at the highest level, right? You tapped into their minds right away and knew you got it just right all the way through your gut what their needs were. And you understood how to step in and offer them what they needed and wanted, right? This point of view is valuable, especially if you've struggled to figure out your Fred Burns only, right? Or if you've tried to overcome the fear that comes with niching and you need clarity on coming to these answers, right? In fact, all of Bethany's tips for unlocking that niche for yourself are fantastic. Tapping into the deeper why, thinking about where you could incorporate your story and what resonates within you, and reframing your own mindset so that you ask, what if I couldn't fail? What would I do? I love that question. I love those questions. I really do. So if you are struggling with niching, I would go back and listen to this episode again and now dig in and do the work with the pen and paper, right? And a little nuance that I want to point out here is that Bethany specifically said that it isn't fast work. Right? It isn't just getting out the notebook and answering a few questions and there you go. It sometimes does take more. You have to come back to that. You have to write all your information, write your notes, and then come back to it. It's funny, I was recently at East End Interiors, and I actually talked about this, and I talked about, doing it one day, writing that notebook full of ideas, and then coming back to it 2 or 3 days later, and then coming back to it maybe a week or two later, okay? This is how you just keep pulling away the layers of the onion that you are, right? We're all these onions, and we got to pull our layers back and get down to what we really are about, all right? But beyond that, though, it is something you can do. It is something you can figure out. Okay, you might take a little work, but you can do it. And when you do, it really does open new possibilities for your business. All right, because in turn, when you do this, you're going to be bringing even better service and experiences to your clients. Right? Because they are the clients that need you, and they are out there, the people that you can serve in a different way, in a higher way, better than anybody else. All right, you just have to figure out who you are. Okay, and what you bring to the table so that you can figure out what they are. And if you find yourself doubting yourself, I urge you to take a step back and remember those times when you've already had that experience, when you've had that moment where it was just all clicking. Okay, and put yourself in that space, try and remember it, and try and document what it was about it. All right. And then Bethany also said that we need to champion ourselves and, really just pat away and stamp down that imposter syndrome if it rears its ugly head. All right. Don't allow it in. Just say no. Nope. Not inviting you, okay? So now, if you are listening and you've been thinking about starting your own podcast, okay, make sure you go take advantage of Bethany's complimentary download, Top 5 Tips to Podcasting for Passion and Profit at Atelier. I have trouble with this word, ladies and gents. AtelierReed.com, okay? That's ATELIARWREDE.com. Of course, it'll be in the show notes, all right? And don't forget that Bethany has very generously offered a complimentary 30-minute discovery call for any of you listening who are trying to tap deeper into your own voice, okay? You can take advantage of that at atelierreed.com/LuAnn. Again, it'll be in the show notes, okay? So thank you to Bethany for showing up today. I love it when I get an aha. That's a high five for Bethany and giving me an aha. Such a great feeling to learn something new. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. And it's High Point's around the corner. I hope I'm going to see you. Check out the link tree for all the different ways to connect with me at High Point. Thanks tons for joining me today. Decide to be excellent. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at LuAnnNigara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.